you for having us. We're going to see if we can solve the world's problems up here and get some hotels built by the end of our 45 minutes. So just to set the stage in terms of, I will introduce a panel, but I'll give you a few slides first. So HVS is a hospitality consulting firm. Probably 50% of the work that we do is feasibility studies for new hotels. And so I've got some stats that I'm going to share with you, and then we'll lead into a discussion with the panelists here. So if we look at the growth in supply in BC in the last 3 years, overall, we've got 1,377 hotels in the province, almost 83,000 rooms, just over 83,000 rooms. That's grown less than 1% every year in the last 3 years, and last year it only grew by about 0.2%. So as we have properties closing, redevelopments in Vancouver, that's netting out to even smaller supply growth than we'd seen in the past couple of years. So a picture that is not the direction we want to go in terms of growing the industry, and we'll kind of talk about some of the factors and how that's changing. On the positive side of things, there are currently 19 hotels under construction in the province. So we've got about 2,700 hotel rooms, which represents 3.3% of the total inventory. So that sub 1% growth that we've seen for the last 3 years is likely to start to turn around now that we've got some of these new properties under construction. Average size of the new hotels, 136 rooms, 47%. The majority of the pipeline is branded, so there's not a lot of independent properties that are under construction. Of those rooms, 47% are Marriott branded, 18% are Hyatt branded, and then there's a collection of other brands across the spectrum. The largest property that's under construction is a 315-room Element Hotel in Richmond. So if we go market by market, I think we're starting off with the 9 hotels that are under construction in Greater Vancouver. We've got, as I mentioned, the Element Hotel. We've got, I'm flipping all my slides here. We've got in downtown Vancouver. So there's 2 Element Hotels in Greater Vancouver. One is in Richmond, the 315 rooms, and then we've got a dual-branded Element Moxie in downtown Vancouver. So that'll be the first time we're seeing the Moxie brand come to BC. There's a conversion of an existing building that is basically being retrofitted, and it's going to be a trademark collection. That's 73 rooms. Amicon Developments has 2 projects. One, the Arden Hotel, 62 rooms. That one should be open for FIFA. That's a conversion of an office building. And then there's the Block, which is a part of a mixed-use residential development, another boutique-style property. Out in Metrotown, I think some of the invites have gone out already for the grand opening of the Hyatt Place in Metrotown. So that's 159 rooms, part of a residential tower that Mundy Hotels has taken over and is completing. And then the Residence Inn by Marriott in Richmond has 112 rooms. We mentioned the Element. And in addition to the Element, Pinnacle Developments is doing a Meridian adjacent to that, so another 141 rooms. So that's about 1,400 rooms in Metro Vancouver that are under construction. And if we look at our Vancouver Island properties, so home where we're here is Hyatt Centric in Old Town. And then there's 2 Town Place Suites by Marriott, one in Langford and one near the Victoria Airport in Sydney. So about 400 rooms under construction there. And then moving into the interior, we've got Grand Forks. There's a little 33-room property under construction in Grand Forks. 2 hotels in Kamloops, the Comfort Inn and a Hyatt Place. Kelowna's got the former Canada Hotel that will come back this year as a dual-branded DoubleTree Hilton Garden Inn. The Kelowna Airport has the Sutton Place Hotel that's broken ground, is under construction. Fairfield and Marriott Fairfield by Marriott in Merritt that you can't miss if you're in the community there. And then in Revelstoke, a boutique, the Carl Hotel, 154-room Carl Hotel. So there's another 937 rooms there. So with that, we've kind of set the stage for the activity that's happening around the province. I will tell you that this is the development pipeline in terms of what's actually under construction. From our standpoint as feasibility consultants, we've never been more active. There's probably 30 I think I put the numbers together, it was 42 projects in Vancouver that were active, and by the time I put it on paper, it jumped to 44. So lots of activity there. We're seeing lots of activity on the island in Victoria, which brings us to our conversation here. I've got Stephen Chen, Hotel Sales Investment with NAI Commercial. Chris Quigley, the Director of Development for Arise Developments, and Jocelyn Jenkyns, the City Manager for the City of Victoria. So thank you all for joining me here today to chat about supply and hotel development. Maybe I'll start just giving you each a chance to introduce yourself. And, Stephen, I know how you landed on this panel. You're immersed in hotels every day, but Chris and Jocelyn, give us your connection to hotels here, but we'll start with you, Stephen.
Thank you, Carrie. It's a pleasure to be here on this panel. My connection to hotels started roughly almost 25 years ago. I was working for Salmon Hotels, and then my previous general manager is also here, Cyrus Merchant. He was my general manager at the Salmon on Georgia Street.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie, and good afternoon, everyone. For me, hotels are a bit of a treat, really. My bread and butter is residential. I work on condo rental projects. I've been doing that for 20 years or so. And so whenever a hotel project comes up, it does seem to be a bit of a sort of special asset class. I worked on a hotel 20 years ago back in London. Funnily enough, one of the ones that was on your list in Vancouver, I got rezoned. Started work on it 10 years ago, got it rezoned 7 years ago, still in construction. So it shows the kind of life cycle and length of hotel projects. And then currently I've got 3 hotel projects on my desk at the moment at Arise. So yeah, for me, a bit of a sort of personal connection in that they sort of seem to crop up every couple of years, partly probably because of market cycles, but also just I think we're in a bit of a moment.
Good. It is afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, my connection to hotels, I started my career with the City of Victoria running the Victoria Conference Centre. So hotels have a very special place in my heart. I've worked with many of you in this room. And I now find myself having taken on many different roles at the city, as the city manager, really looking at how do we become better partners with hotel developers and developers in general, and really trying to look at policies and just being able to be better kind of business-focused people at City Hall. So I feel like it's a little bit of full circle, but yeah, really happy to be here.
Excellent. So Stephen, why don't we start with you? So we just looked at 19 hotels under construction across the province. How are your clients looking at the hotel market when they consider building or buying today?
That's a great question, Carrie. I think for my clients, we all understand it's supply and demand. I think we are at a moment where coming out of COVID, we are experiencing a full recovery from all market segments, from the leisure side, from the corporate side, and now with the newly approved ADS from China, we'll probably see some corporates, some groups start traveling, the buses. So at the same time, we're also seeing our domestic traveling taken up simply because of our neighbor to the south. There's some political turmoils down there. So I think in terms of the demand side, we're seeing a tremendous increase. Now, on the other hand, on the supply side, unfortunately, during COVID, BC Housing took out quite a few inventories from the market. So now we have a shortage of rooms. We have an increase of demand. Such a strong demand obviously resulted in double-digit growth on RevPAR in some markets. And now, so with my clients, most of them, they are hotel operators or they are long-term investors. When they're buying hotels, they're paying close attention to the specific cap rates of the market. For example, downtown Vancouver, we're looking at roughly six plus cap returns, same as Victoria, and then secondary or tertiary markets, we're seeing 7 or 8 caps. So that's sort of those are the factors that they are considering when they're buying hotels. In terms of building, obviously we're looking at urban centers for mostly downtown Vancouver or Victoria. That's what they're considering.
Okay. So Jocelyn, the Greater Victoria Hotel Development Working Group has recently been formed. Can you tell us a little bit more about the formation of that group and kind of the genesis of where that came from?
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, just a bit of context around the visitor economy in Greater Victoria. We welcome about 4.9 million visitors a year. It's about a $3.5 billion industry, and about almost 90% of that is related to hotel revenue. So while, as Stephen indicated, the market is strong, we've bounced back after COVID, we have lost a lot of supply. We've lost about 2,000 rooms over the last decade, and I think we recognized with the amount of time that development takes, it was really important for us to come together as a community to look at how we seize this moment in time to be very proactive about hotel development. So Destination Greater Victoria, and Jeremy Loveday is actually in the audience, who's done an incredible job in shepherding this group and this work, pulled together a group of people who met in person. We've been meeting since November, just a handful of meetings. But basically across all of the sectors, we've had municipalities, we've had First Nations, we've had hotel lenders, we've had hotel developers, and we've had obviously our tourism partners. And we, in that short period of time, I think we have done a very deep dive on what it's going to take to achieve that 2,000 rooms over 10 years. That's also baked into our new official community plan. Jeremy said that it wouldn't be a spoiler alert if I let everybody know that the report will be out next week. And I'm sure it will get a lot of attention. It was really based on the very good work done in Vancouver, so we kind of are indeed, according to Michelle's reference there. But what we've been looking at are kind of our current planning policies, approval processes, identifying where the bottlenecks are, and just being able to explore partnership opportunities and examining what potential incentives we need to offer to get those hotel rooms built.
So the 2,000 rooms over 10 years is the ultimate?
It is. The kind of piece behind that, though, is that the remaining stock, half of it is over 50 years old. So while the 2,000 will replace what we've lost, we need to keep an eye on those other properties that will need redevelopment in the future.
So Chris, you have, it's more than dabbled, but you've been in and out of the hotel industry as opportunities arose. Tell us a bit about the hotel development that you're currently working on and why it's compelling at this time.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it's compelling at this time because of some of the challenges with other asset classes. I was at a real estate conference recently, and I think probably the two biggest topics of discussion were around mass timber and hotel development. And I think one of the reasons for that is some of the challenges with housing development at the moment. We're really sort of being hit from both sides with high costs and challenging demand drivers with immigration and some other aspects. So hotels kind of really almost come forward in to fill that vacuum with respect to it's a very flexible asset class. There's policy that's kind of pushing us to that direction, which Jocelyn sort of mentioned on. And it's also got some other strengths which I think have allowed it to come forward. So yeah, for me and the work we do at Arise in Victoria, we have a couple of projects on the go at the moment. So the kind of showcase project is a new hotel, approximately 200 rooms at Pandora and Government. So Centre Ice kind of for downtown, fantastic site for being able to leverage what the city already has with what's in Old Town, what's on the amenities on Government in particular. But I think it's also being able to meet a need, not just the 2,000 rooms that we need in the city, but also like our vision and our partner's vision for that project is really to be high design, sort of high-end luxury, but really filling a gap which Victoria at the moment doesn't meet in what's offering. So we're looking at that project. As well as that, we're currently doing due diligence on a new hotel project in James Bay neighborhood. And then very, very different type of project. We're working with Pachidat First Nation out in Port Renfrew, looking at some hospitality, both small cabins, but also hopefully over time up to a larger hotel, both for workforce and for guests as well. So very different, sort of more resort-based, but I think that sort of diversity also speaks to why developers are more interested in hotels this year, which is some of the challenges of the housing market has really forced people to diversify what they're interested in.
One of the conversations that comes up kind of regularly in my office is that you have developers that have expertise developing, but don't have the expertise necessarily in the hotel space. So, Stephen and Chris, I'd be curious from your perspectives, how are we going to bridge that gap and get developers that know how to get things built, feel comfortable with the hotel space and how to actually execute on delivering something at, especially at the higher end when you start getting into these high design luxury spaces?
I think for example, the prime example would be the Marriott right across the street. So I think in terms for new developments to work, JV model would be great. A successful JV structure between the two sides, between a traditional developer or a hotel developer and a hotel operator, where it will be the successful recipe would be a blend or a mixture of both models, where the income model favors the hotel operator. They can value the hotel based on performance. After it's opened, stabilized income, they know what kind of net income they're generating. However, on the other hand, for developers, they would favor the forward sale model, where it's almost like pre-selling a condo. They know exactly what the construction cost is. They know what the pre-sale number is, whether it's based on per room, whether it's based on per square feet, just like a condo. Where we see in the market, the most successful model would be a blend of both, where the developer can deliver a cold shell to the hotel operator. They can finish it off with the specific brand that they have chosen, and after it's opened, stabilized, then the hotel developer gets paid off for the remainder. That's where they can make their profit.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And one thing I would add is that over the last 5 years or so, a lot of developers in this country have really moved into the rental space. And again, that's because of policy, that's because of market drivers, financing, etc. And there's much more of a synergy between market rental projects and hotels. It's not like for like, but more on that sort of recognizing income, recognizing that asset class as to some of the strengths you need to bake into it from the start. So I think people and developers that are skilled in the rental space definitely have much more knowledge that they can bring to the hotel game. And if anything, hotel gives a bit more flexibility, because with rental projects, often we have the constraints of Residential Tenancy Acts, housing agreements sometimes that the municipalities put on us for affordability and other aspects. So hotel is in that great spot where you're completely in control, really, of being able to set prices on a 24-hour basis versus more like a 12-month basis.
So Jocelyn, from the perspective of the City of Victoria, you've got a number that you want to see. Is there a specific type of hotel that the city is targeting? Is there a specific class of hotel? What is surrounding that number in terms of color for development?
I thought I'd just say we'd take them all, but we have a number of, I think we have, I can't remember how many hotel zone sites, but they're not always perfect size. We have lost a lot of that kind of mid-range, which is important. But I think we will have to look at our own policies to get creative about kind of what can be built in various areas. Clearly, heritage is something that is tricky to work with. But from an experiential perspective that's kind of unique to Victoria, that would be very attractive. But I know kind of what it takes to build near Old Town and what that looks like. So yeah, I think when I look at where Vancouver has gone with their hotel policy, it's very much an economic development driven kind of approach versus a kind of site specific context based approach. So yeah, I think there's this perfect kind of intersectionality coming where our planning department with new guidelines, new OCP really needs to look at the economic kind of realities of what people are building and what's feasible. So I didn't completely nail what I want, what we want in Victoria, but I think we understand kind of some of the limitations and constraints in terms of the city.
Yeah, and I guess contained within that answer is sort of, it's not specific, it's growth that is part of the goal. Maybe we can just speak a little bit, and we don't need to get too much into the weeds on it, but Pandoran government does have some history. Is there some learnings about that site on the first round of potential hotel development that future developers can learn from in the community? And maybe both you and Chris can speak to them.
Well, maybe I'll just start because yes, it was the Plaza Hotel that burned down. It's been a vacant site for many, many years. We are very excited about the prospect of a new hotel coming, and unfortunately, the application that came before council just didn't hit the mark. It really wasn't sensitive to kind of the genuine character of Victoria, the gateway to Old Town. And so it really kind of, it just didn't hit the mark with council on that basis. I'm very hopeful that, a new applicant will have taken all of that into consideration and has a great vision for what's going to be there. So, Chris.
So just as we preface that, just to give the audience a little bit of a background, Chris, you've engaged a very high-profile architect for the site. You've spoken about high design, so you're looking to take it to the next level. How do you make that work on this site in Victoria?
Yeah, well, we've got a very bold vision for a high design hotel on that site, and I wish I had drawings to show up on the screen, but I don't. We're very much at the starting gate. So I think for me, I can speak to how it responds to Old Town. I could speak to sort of how it engages with the plaza on that specific site and really get into the weeds. But I think just one thing I'll flag, which is, I guess, my hopes and dreams, which is we build on a lot of the goodwill that we've seen in the hotel working group, and Jocelyn's been at the forefront of a lot of that, which is how do we improve the process to get to a yes? And whether it's that project or the kind of Vancouver project that I mentioned that I was fighting city for 5+ years to get that rezoned. I think just having quicker, more efficient discussions early on in the process is so advantageous to applicants, especially hotel developers, where there's a lot of risk, having to put a lot of equity in, having to make some assumptions, especially when guidelines are a bit more vague on certain things which are important for hotel operations. So I guess my hopes and dreams for that site, I've got lots of them on the design side, but from a process standpoint, I'd love to come back to this summit in a year and talk about how we worked collaboratively with the city on working through what will be some tough conversations, because not everybody likes everything, but we can have those discussions, have those trade-off conversations much quicker than what's been done to date.
So we can not speak specifically to Victoria because we don't need to put Jocelyn on the spot here, but approvals and permitting have consistently been cited as a barrier to efficient hotel development. Are you seeing municipalities get better at that? And given that there's a huge desire to see more projects moving forward?
Yeah, I can speak to the work that we've done in Victoria, but also what I've seen in some other markets, which is there are definitely a lot of goodwill, both at the higher strategic community policy level, but also at the site policy specific level. But there are very unique circumstances that hotels have compared to other types of development. If you just take the ground floor of a project, for example, the first floor of a hotel very, very different to the first floor of a condominium tower. Lots more back of house, lots more servicing, different dynamics that are needed. A lot of municipal zoning schedules and bylaws are written for largely residential development, maybe with some retail as well. I think it's really important that the municipalities increasingly come to the table early on, recognizing the quite unique circumstances that servicing, loading, the parking dynamics, the different types of commercial spaces, non-revenue spaces that are needed at certain parts of a building. So I think, short answer, yes, progress is being made, but it's really now into execution mode.
Stephen, what markets are you seeing developers interested outside of the major markets of Vancouver and Victoria?
What I'm seeing right now is the Okanagans, also Campbell River, or resort, mostly resort type of product markets. Parksville, very strong. Tofino and Whistler, but these two markets have prohibitive factors for new developments. Other than that, I think Kelowna also enjoys a lot of demands right now.
Our current owners, because the hotel market is, as you mentioned, it's a pretty strong market right now. As we're hitting record RevPAR numbers, and there's a lot of pent up demand. We got peak weekends and summers and major events and all of this. So we've got operators that are doing well, or owners of existing properties that are doing well. Are you seeing some of those developers that, as they try to expand their portfolios and price per key is going up, are they starting to consider new development?
Absolutely. I think we're literally at that cross point where it almost makes sense to build instead of buying existing, because the valuation is at an all-time high. We've had the last 3 years, all record numbers for the last 3 years. So from a valuation point of view, the per key numbers is also at an all-time high.
The other issue is that it's hard to find assets for sale. So even if you're willing to pay kind of a high price per key, given the success of some hotels, they're not transacting.
There's no inventory. That is correct. Yes.
That's a problem for a broker.
We keep looking. We'll look harder.
Yeah, exactly. So Jocelyn, you made the point that municipalities in our prep call had really been focused on housing, and they had not been looking towards the hotel space. How does a city course correct from that? And given that housing problem hasn't been solved, we can't say check and move on to hotel. How do you do that?
Thanks. Yeah, it has been, the City of Victoria was out even way ahead of the province for Bill 44 and kind of all the changes there. So certainly councils have been very focused on that, but our council is also recognizing to build a vibrant city, you have to support the visitor economy, and you have to be able to invest in other things. I mean, we might be one of the only cities that owns a jazz club, so we've kind of stepped into places where things have been, at risk, and the city needs to kind of step in. But I think the work of the hotel development, the working group, I think we've had our planning staff at the table, and they've heard very directly from developers. Like, we've had very candid conversations. So I think we inherently know kind of what we need to do in terms of our processes. I think just looking at, how do we shrink that time horizon for all of this? How do we take a first time right approach? How do we have consistency and certainty, stop this resubmission loop that goes on for years and years? So I think we have the ability to do this. It'll be the test, actually, and we're quite excited to be up to the test. And as Chris said, love to come back at a future BCHA and talk about the successes and how it worked. So, yeah.
Are there specific policies or procedures that have now actually changed, or is projects like Chris is piloting these?
Yeah, I mean, this is really our first pilot. We have this perfect storm of a new official community plan, new design guidelines. We've delegated a bunch of stuff to staff directly, but we need to go further than that to be able to do this. I always made a joke, having come from the conference center when I started taking on different roles at the city, that, you know, the answer is yes, what's the question? And then I started working with regulators where the answer is no, but convince me otherwise, kind of thing. And so I think it's culture change for the city to be able to work in partnership and to be able to kind of get to the end product in a good way, but very transparently and with build a trusting relationship.
So Chris, a large part of the development pipeline is branded hotel properties, and that tends to be driven from the financing side of things, is that the banks get more comfortable when you're building branded. What's the intention with the projects that you're working with? Are you looking at branding? And if so, how do you navigate what brands requirements are versus what cities' development goals are and these types of issues?
Yeah, a bit of both. We're looking at a branded hotel with the necessary guidelines for one project. Likewise, we're looking at more of a sort of a soft brand for another project to give us more of a sort of backstop. Well, both the backstop, depending on what the future entails, but also just gives a more robust offering for underwriting and for sort of as an investment potential, recognizing that you can tap into a database of a brand's guests and clientele. So I think for us, diversity is kind of the king in that, in terms of wanting to make sure we cover all bases. In terms of how it relates to city policy, I can't really speak to if there's any conflict in that at the moment. I would say that probably a lot of the brand guidelines are probably more interior focused or internal focused, but recognizing that often the area program, the spaces for certain things will always land on a diagram, on a drawing that requires planning approval. So I think there's definitely some crossover on some of those things. Parking, parking is always conversation number 1, 2, and 3 for any type of development. And so I think that's something that when you work with the municipality, you just have to recognize as to if a brand requires a certain amount of parking, does that align with what the city has? And across British Columbia, I think there's been a bit of a sea change in more flexibility on parking, especially in the areas that we've worked in. So there does seem to be a nice alignment between trying to right-size parking, both for what the market and hotel brands need, but also what maybe some other bigger mobility goals that cities have.
Is it, in terms of parking right now, are you seeing brands wanting more parking, cities wanting more parking, and developers always are driving towards less parking, just the cost to construct? But
yeah, it's hard to generalize because every municipality has its own certain flavor, but I think there's a general move towards cities being okay with less parking and being more trusting of if that's what the market needs, then they're okay with that, especially in downtown locations. And back to one of the points that sort of Jocelyn was making earlier, which is we need all different types of hotels in Greater Victoria, both downtown, suburban, and further out as well. So all of those have different parking dynamics in terms of what can be provided. But parking is incredibly expensive, especially in downtown sites. So we're always trying to just think about who's the target market. Is it someone coming in by float plane and just there for the weekend and doesn't really need a car? Is it someone driving from Up Island or getting the ferry across? So we're doing a lot of analysis at the moment as to who's the guest, who's the target market for our project, and trying to almost build a parking and transport model off the back of that.
so Stephen, from your perspective, what sells? And I've got a two-part question. Existing stabilized assets, what does the market want to buy? And the second part of that is, you talked about that forward sale model, and it can almost be, it's probably the number one question I get asked on a blind call that I answer in the office is, hi, I'm such and such a developer. I got your name and I'm looking to develop a project on my site. I would like to talk to Marriott, Hilton, Fairmont, and will they buy my hotel, or will they buy my site to build a hotel? So do forward sales exist?
Do forward sales exist? I think this two-part question, I think first of all, for a transaction to actually compete and go through, yes, existing hotels would be the easiest and most favorable by the lenders because there are track records, it is open, less risk, and obviously the valuation is based on cap rates, market cap rates. So it is relatively a very safe investment. In terms of new developments, obviously it takes time. With today's construction costs that we're seeing, the number is very hard to pencil. That's why the JV component is quite important. Or unless the land was acquired, so long ago, and almost that land cost is not considered into part of the pro forma, then yes, that new developments obviously would make sense. Where also what we've seen is for new developments, mixed use would obviously make a lot of sense, right? With the added enhanced guest experience. If you have a new development, you generally would have a CRUs, the ground floor retail units that you probably have restaurants, shopping experience. You can have a nail salon, you can have a barber shop. I mean, last minute, if I'm attending a conference, I need a haircut last minute.
Those
Those
nice.
are,
Yeah.
yeah, those are things where, those are important, enhance the guest experiences. So I think those are the sort of the two-part answers to your questions.
Okay. So, and this is to all of you, what is the risk if we don't push some more hotel development forward and have new hotels built? And, I know that some of the existing hotels and hotel owners, I do get calls and they say, well, nothing's feasible. No one should build anything. But that's very self-serving to the existing community of hotel owners. Why do we need new hotels, and what's the risk if we don't get some of them built?
Yeah, I mean, again, not to keep coming back to conferences, but, conferences book anywhere from 5 years out. A really critical element of any bid package is putting together those room blocks, and it's getting harder and harder, especially across a kind of price range. And so I feel like our conference business is at risk. It's the business that brings delegates that spend more than visitors. They stay multiple nights. A single conference can generate more than $1 million in economic impact. And that is what we drive at. We drive at those larger conferences with multiple overnight stays. So I really feel it's at risk. We are already booking out into 2030 now, and we need to be able to send a message that we're open for business. Victoria is a conference destination with certainty. And many of our hotels are doing very well. We talked about RevPAR, we talked about occupancy. The rates are kind of sky high, and that's a challenge for us. The good news around conferences is that they're especially association business, which is the bread and butter. They're rotational in nature, so we're a Western outpost that always gets a shot at hosting. But all these others, we're always competing with Edmonton, Calgary, other cities with a larger offering of hotels. So that's the risk that I see.
Yeah, to put it frankly, I think if we don't build these hotels, we're not going to get the cities that we want in this country. I think off the back of COVID, a lot of our downtowns across the country really did get beaten up, and that combined with sort of working from home policies have really challenged a lot of local businesses and a lot of our public spaces. So the reason I think that hotels can help kind of supercharge the city building part is because residential and office buildings are largely private spaces. They're either used by the people that live there or work there. Hotels just have this natural churn. They become a bit of the city's living room with respect to the lobby, the restaurants that people both from the city but also visiting the city use. So I think they're just so fundamental in being the character of a city, that if we don't build what we need and fill the gaps, that we definitely threaten the viability of what we want our cities to be.
I think the hidden risk is if we don't build, we might be tempted and labeled being too expensive. We're gouging the market a little bit, so we have to be very careful. And if we don't shorten that gap, yes, it's a short-term glory that for the existing hotels to enjoy the great demand. But then organically, we all have to grow the market in order to fulfill and meet the demand.
You know, I think one of the things from my perspective on it and why we need to build is that it also keeps the existing inventory on their toes and reinvesting. And we've all seen communities where, you know, they're filled consistently. You don't really need to spend any money to revitalize or refresh the property. And so that results in, you know, it almost feels like gouging when it's a really tired product that you have to pay a top rate for. You're fine to pay the rate if you're going into a community that has maintained and there's demand there for it. But yeah, so I think the new supply almost keeps the existing owners and operators honest on it. So in our last couple of minutes here, what would you like everyone to have learned on this topic of supply and growth? So why don't we start with you, Jocelyn?
Thanks, Carrie. I mean, I think for me, this is about collaboration. This is about, you know, yes, everybody has a role to play, but, you know, developers are not evil people. They are there to build product that's highly desired by cities. And this is about trust. This is about relationships. And really having a deep understanding of what it takes. And that's what I've really appreciated about the work that we've just been through. We segmented various hotel types. We dove deep into, you know, timelines, financial considerations, and that's what municipalities really need to understand, embrace, and then reflect that in their policies.
Jocelyn stole my answer, that developers aren't bad people, but I think my takeaway would be that, and it kind of builds on the previous session on advocacy, but also what Jocelyn was saying around partnerships, in that it's not just a one and done thing. It's very much, it's a partnership that has to really go through to execution for day one opening, but also an ongoing relationship. So, you know, there's great goodwill with respect to the planning process at the moment and making changes to zoning and process, etc. But we've got to make sure those partnerships continue to flourish, even into things like construction, when we're having challenges with having to close a street to get something built. Again, just making sure we've got each other's backs, both on the regulatory side, but also on the investment and development side, so that, you know, we're all shooting towards the same goal. There will be tricky moments, so just making sure we've got that partnership which is strong enough to go through planning, construction, and operations.
I think the key takeaway is the timing is right now. Finally, the numbers supports new developments. The market is demand more product, new product. So I think start the conversation and let's build the hotel community together.
Okay, well, and with that, let's have some lunch and then get building.
Okay.
Thank you all for your time today.